My name is Mika Cole. I'm the repertory producer. And can I just say, we are about to have an amazing season in 2019. Yes! And the reason you should believe me is because my psychic, everybody knows I have a psychic. She told me this. Bill, you know, she's the real deal. I'm so excited to welcome you to the show introduction for As You Like It, directed by Rosa Joshi. We have about 35 minutes to hear from the creative team and get to know some of the individuals working on the show. I had the opportunity to sit through part of the read-through this afternoon, and this cast is amazing, and I can't wait for you to see them. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Doreen Oskay. Thank you, Mika.
I am Doreen Oskay. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and it's definitely my privilege to get to work here at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. I want to introduce a few folks that are in the crowd tonight with us. Former board members Pam Hammond, Bob Rasmussen, and Cynthia Lawrence, who's also a show sponsor for Hairspray. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you. Current board members Susan Kane, Priscilla Weaver, Dave Glenn, and Louise Gund. So thank you all. Our Tutor Guild president has graced us with his presence. Mr. Kenneth Benton is here in the crowd. Sponsors for a few other shows that are here. Jimmy Kate Wolfheiser here for Mother Road. We've got Carolyn Mandel for Indecent. And I'm so excited that you are here to share this with us this week. And for this show, our producing partners, Robert Porter and Charlotte Lynn. Sponsors, Don Pena and Renee Dubois. Sponsor, who's also lead sponsor on this show, Chris DeBose, is here with US Bank. I want to share something with you, and I don't know if I can do it without crying because I talked to the folks today, but one of our show sponsors, you'll notice, is an estate gift. And this is an area that I work in. And he was a World War II vet. And he would have his men read Shakespeare aloud when the bombs would fall. And this was his favorite play. And I don't know about y'all, but with everything going on in the world, I want to live in Arden. And so I thank you for this gift to his family.
Thank you so much, Doreen. We're going to now ask for the folks who are part of the As You Like It show team to introduce themselves. There are quite a few of us, so I just ask you, please, they are all fantastic. Please, we'll have one round of applause. Finish with the whole group. So we'll start with the creative team. And Rosa, I will now hand this to you so you can acknowledge the folks that aren't with us here today.
Okay, so first, I'm Rosa Joshi, and I'm the director. Folks who are not with us today and are missed are Sarah Clement. She's our wonderful scenic designer. You've hopefully got a chance to see the beautiful set as you walked in. Our lighting designer, Christina Watanabe. Our composer, Palmer Heffron. Our sound designer, Nook. I'm going to screw up Nook's name. Kanchana Banka. Sorry, Nook. And our resident fight director, Jonathan Topo, known to us. So those are the people who are not here with us today, but who've had such an incredible part of taking us into Arden. So I just wanted to acknowledge them, and then
the
we'll
rest
go.
Of the
Yes.
creative team.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Amrita Ramanan, she, her, hers, production dramaturg.
Alan Armstrong, he, him, his, dramaturg.
Alice Gosti, she, her, hers, associate director of movement.
And you met me, but I'm a she, her, hers.
Chris Shergi, costume designer, she, her, hers. Rebecca Clark-Carey, she, her, hers, voice and text director.
Wiley Basho-Gorn, he, him, his, Shakespeare dramaturg and text resident for the 2019 season.
Rex Young, I'm playing Touchstone, he, him, his.
Kevin Kennerly, Duke Frederick, he, him, his.
James Ryan, he, him, his. Sir Oliver Martext, Charles the Wrestler.
Michelle Mays, Maisie, Amiens, she, her, hers.
Sean Taylor Corbett, I'm playing Oliver, he, him, his.
Rachel Crowell, I'm playing Duke Sr., she, her, hers.
Caroline Schaefer, Corin,
she, her, hers. Kate Herster, she, her, hers. Celia.
I'm Erica Sullivan, I'm she, her, hers, and I'm playing Jake Reese.
I'm McGregor Arnie, I'm he, him, his, and I'm playing Sylvius.
I'm Jessica Coe, I'm playing Rosalind, she, her, hers.
Lilia Hushman, playing Phoebe, she, her, hers.
Hannah Fawcett, I'm playing Jacqueline Du Bois, she, her, hers.
My name's Grant Lukey, and I'm playing he, him, his, and I'm playing William and some ensemble parts.
Roman Saragosa, he, him, his, playing Orlando.
Tyrone Wilson, Adam, he, him, his.
Francie Milet, assistant director, she, her, hers.
Will Wilhelm, they, them. I'm playing LeBeau and Aubrey.
Eric Solis, I'm understudying for William and some ensemble parts, pronouns he, him, his.
Jonah Thorpe Cramp, he, him, his. I'm understudying for Sir Oliver Martex and Charles the Wrestler.
Hello, everyone. I just want to start with saying how really honored and excited and overwhelmed I am to be invited back to work at OSF. Thank you all for having me again. I was thinking about what I was going to say here, and I've been doing a lot of political war plays, also known as the history plays. Some of you know I don't really like that term. That's a different discussion. But I've been living a lot in those dark plays. And in contrast, I haven't done a Shakespeare comedy in about a decade. I hope I remember how to be funny. I hear that it's like there's something about timing. So it's really been rejuvenating for me to get to dive into an expansive, big-hearted comedy like As You Like It. Working on this play, as I started reading it and thinking about it, I've been thinking a lot about love and what it means to be true to yourself, to be true to oneself. And I've been thinking a lot about the search for our authentic selves. And As You Like It, this search for me is inextricably tied up with love and how love transforms us. Who do we become when we're in love? How does that person relate to our true selves, either both in terms of revealing or hiding who we really are? I've been thinking a lot about the experience of how the experience of being in love transforms you, how it might make you more whole. And I think ultimately I was really drawn to a story of finding your authentic self through love. And my way into the play, I often think about a character that I'm really drawn to, and of course it's Rosalind. I really found my way into the play through Rosalind's story, the story of this young woman who's trapped in a somewhat suffocating patriarchal world, who's lost her immediate family, who's torn between loyalties, between her cousin and, in our version, her mother, her uncle, and her mother and her cousin. She's banished from her home. She takes on a male persona, perhaps in order to try and gain some power. She enters a wilderness, and through her disguise of masculine strength, she finds the power in her own vulnerability and discovers her true self and a lasting love. As You Like It is one of the plays in the canon for me that really deeply examines what love is. I love how the play confronts us with all the ways in which love messes us up, right? Rosalind totally sums it up when she says love is merely a madness. And the play gives us all different kinds of love. Unrequited love, disguised love, hidden love, lustful love, idolized love, and especially the love that I think is at the core of the play, the deep, deep mystery of love at first sight. I love how the play also challenges our ideas of love at first sight. Both of those of us who are hopeless romantics and absolutely believe that love at first sight is possible, it's a real thing, and those of us who might be, shall we say, a little bit more skeptical about these things. I love how the play shows us how complicated love at first sight can be, also how varied. There's the love at first sight that prompts us to a sort of recklessness that makes us do wild things and grand gestures, like publicly posting our really bad love poetry for the whole world to see. Like Orlando does it with Letters in a Forest, and we might today do it on Instagram or Facebook. Or I love. There's also love at first sight that can't really be trusted, that has to be tested, has to be stripped of its illusion so that it can survive infatuation. And love at first sight that just doesn't make any sense, that can't be justified, that can't be understood by our rational brains, but somehow we know in our souls to be true. I am notoriously unsentimental. You can ask my family. But I am at heart a secret romantic. And I think that Rosalind and Orlando are counterpoints to each other. I love how they bring out the unexpected in each other, how they complement each other. There's a bond there that is in itself authentic. Rosalind may definitely have the upper hand in terms of being in disguise, and she may seem to be in control much of the time, but Orlando also unsettles her, unbalances her in deliciously delightful ways, and that we might all recognize regardless of our gender. And that delight, I hope, is what will be infectious for us. Casting. Some of you may know that I do all-female work with, I have a company called Upstart Crow Collective. And so it might not surprise you that I just couldn't bear to think of doing a play with only 4 women in it, 4 female roles. So some of the traditionally male roles are being cast as females, and Amrita will say more about this. Part of this reasoning, I'm always looking for ways to give women more opportunities in classical work, and so I'll be really frank and just say, I looked and said, what are some of the great roles I could give to women? But of course, I'm also then interested in how this resonates and impacts the story. So the play ends with, spoiler alert, Rosalind and Orlando uniting. And there's also 3 other unions in this play, and it was important to us as a creative team that they weren't all heteronormative unions. So we have Aubrey instead of Audrey, who'll be played as a non-binary character by a non-binary actor. It's so OSF. And it's so wonderful. I think it's this perfect union of a modern sensibility with a classic story. Of course, the play is about more than love, and I think that's really important. There's no question that this love story runs away with the play, but it's also a play about betrayal, jealousy, usurpation, and banishment. It's a story of estranged siblings, of families torn apart. And as I thought about this in terms of the transposition of genders, I began to see Duke Frederick banishing his sister rather than his brother, and how that unlocked some compelling ideas in the play. I started to see the court as a patriarchal world where female power is threatening. It's a male-dominated world, a place of mistrust, paranoia, jealousy, and one that is under the strict control and surveillance of a deeply insecure and suspicious leader. This led... who is a lovely person in real life.
My character's misunderstood.
Has a lot of pain. So this led to the idea of the court being a world that is confined, that is controlled, that is restrictive and highly monitored. And then in that context, the escape to Arden is more of a transformation. So we're not necessarily transported to a completely different place. Rather, as we were talking as a creative team, we talked about the world of the court opening up, releasing, fragmenting into Arden. As Sarah put it, our set designer, a breath opening. So Arden, in contrast, is a place of release, a freeing of control, of constraint, a place where we can perhaps get in touch with our more authentic selves if we so wish. It allows for a kind of purity of expression where our non-conformist selves can come unleashed, where we can connect perhaps to our wild selves. It's magical, it's theatrical, it's wild, it's whimsical. But it was also important to keep in mind that Arden is a place, yes, of release and authenticity, but it's also a place of exile, of isolation, of disruption, and we'll see that also when we move on to talk about the set. Because I'm interested in this journey to our more authentic selves, it was important to me that the scenic world of Arden had to emerge from the world of court. That what we saw happen on stage was about a transformation, a kind of visual paradigm shift, if you will. Because part of the storytelling for me is that no one's going to come and rescue us. If we're going to escape oppression, then we're the ones that will have to create that new way of being in the world. And it isn't necessarily easy to do that. So period, the dreaded question of period for me. What period are you setting this in? I tend to have a modern theatrical abstract sensibility. I love to create imagined worlds that sometimes draw from different periods, influences, and create something hopefully that is uniquely theatrical. Something that feels both timeless and for our time. I'm specifically driven to create worlds on stage that require the audience to engage their imagination. I'm always asking, why does this story need to be told in theater on stage? What is the thing that theater can do that no other art form can do in telling this particular story? For me, that's often about engaging us all in a shared act of imagination. For the brief time that we as artists and audience breathe together in the same space, there's something that goes beyond an unconscious suspension of disbelief. It's really this conscious and willing act of imagination that we go through together. But you have to start somewhere, right? So the idea of strict gendered roles and rules led me to think about a Victorian sensibility and something very particular to that period, a world in which gender and sexuality was clearly defined and clearly confined. And that's where the designers began in their research, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. Chris is going to talk a little bit about clothing. We began with this idea that the clothing in court is constricting, controlled, bound, uniformed almost, and then in Arden there's a release and freeing up of that silhouette. The lighting in court is cold and steely, and then we open up to a wider palette in Arden. Music and song are a huge part of the world. Hairsprays ain't the only musical in town this right now. I was really interested in the voice of the forest being female. So Palmer Heffron, our composer, and I started listening to soulful female singer-songwriters like Tracy Chapman and Alicia Keys. There's going to be live music, live accompaniment. In the workshop, we got to discover the multi-talented facets of our cast, and so there's going to be live accompaniment. There's ukulele, mandolin, drums, guitar. There's going to be some fun. And there's also some evocative sounds that will be played of the forest, will play the set in interesting ways also. And then I've made what people have told me is a bold choice with text in terms of the ending, and there have to be some secrets, right? So we'll see that. And I wanted to say also that I'm thrilled to be working with an all-female creative team for the first time, which is just nuts given the kind of work that I do. So it's just nuts, and it's about time. And we do allow some men and other people in the room also. It's okay. As I said, I've spent a lot of time with political war plays, with the histories, which I love. I love those plays. They're cautionary tales to me. They're warnings about the things that we need to pay attention to if we don't want to repeat the darkness that it lives in them. As You Like It is a play that ultimately makes me, even unsentimental me, feel hopeful. I love that a play that begins in an oppressive realm, in a world of envy, paranoia, jealousy, deep distrust, that it can end so joyously. There's something about the escape to Arden that makes me think about the need to refresh ourselves in times of stress and oppression, the need to find our authentic selves and forge hope out of despair. Because the thing that really hits me in the play is the miraculous power of love that arises out of a hopeless world. I'm so lucky to get to do a workshop. I just want to give a shout out to workshops for classical plays for Shakespeare. Those of you that support that work, that have given to that work, thank you. Because there is no way that we could get to where we are with our thinking on this play without having had that time. So thank you to OSF and to all the donors that make that happen. So there was this day, some of you will remember, when we were all singing different versions of Under the Greenwood Tree. The cast split up into little bands, and they all went off and made their own version, and then we all shared them together. And as I was listening to these incredible versions of the song and these amazing artists, I was just struck by the fact that there's more than one way to fight tyranny. That love and music and joy, they can be pretty powerful weapons to beat down tyranny. And I think as I move through the world today, I feel that need, that to have a sense of refreshment, of release, of hope that I find in this play. A need to imagine that good can come out of the world, that there can be such a thing as a true and lasting love. So I'm really thrilled to run into Arden with this incredible company of artists. I can't wait to invite you all in. And thank you again so much for having me here. Who would like to go next? I realized we didn't. Do you want to speak next?
Yes, I can. Okay, so as I said earlier, I'm Alice Agosti. I'm an Italian-American choreographer, mostly based in Seattle. I've been traveling a lot in the last couple of years. We were counting outside our 7th production in 5 years together.
Yes.
That Rosa and I do. We started with a comedy and we returned to one, so it's really exciting. My background in Italy was in what we call their teatro danza, which is translated to dance, theater dance. So the idea was always from the beginning, when I started making anything of dance, to look at a story or find something that I wanted to say and then translate that to the body somehow. I'm inspired by artists like Pina Bausch, Deviate Physical Theater. Those were like the first 2 groups that we bonded immediately on and kind of found a way to create our own language from that. I'm interested always in movement that can complement, highlight, and enhance the story. In this, there's also just a dance party. It's still complementing all the elements that Rosa was just talking about in terms of what Arden is versus what the court is. I work with the bodies in the room. For this, there's gonna be a tiny bit, at least for the dance party, in which I will be by myself, counting music with Palmer, so maybe not by myself, but creating some choreography that then will be passed on. But because of the option of the possibility that we had of having a workshop, we kind of did already that exchange, so I know what their bodies are, what they like to do, how do they like to be cool on the dance floor or not. I also traumatized them a little bit, but that's a story that they can tell you one day. What else? Just to continue a little bit and explain a little bit for what Rosa was saying about the court being confined and controlled. I'm doing the same thing with movement. We're creating a court that in movement is walking a certain way, in certain physical patterns, and then once we go to the forest, we break it completely. So even the most specific detail is in relationship to what we're trying to say in the story. What else? I'm so excited to be here too. Wow. Thank you for having me. That's mine.
Sure. So, as Rosa said, we sort of started, I think, in clothing. We sort of jumped in the court. It was the easiest place to start because we needed to establish that world of control before we could break it and head into Arden. And we needed to know what that would look like. Sort of early on in our conversations, back in June, I think, we started talking about even the movement being controlled and confined, the movement patterns in that world. And Sarah was also looking at Victorian architecture and things that felt like grids. And this Victorian inspiration led us to sort of explore silhouettes that were confining, had higher necks and fitted bodices. And I think you can see the Victorian inspiration in the clothing in the court stronger than any other part of the show. From there, it was easy to jump into the world of our laborers, or the residents of Arden, which in the shop I think we've been calling our hipster homesteaders. It's sort of a loosening of that Victorian silhouette, similar pieces, but a little more homespun. You can tell that they engage in real labor, that they support themselves, that they work, right? And we have our travelers. That's a group of folks that we witness come from the court. And each of them has their own way into that environment. The way they choose to transform themselves to make that journey is sort of reflective of their characters and what they're bringing to Arden, and then transforms in their personal journey. And then I think we were stuck for a little while around our new society, the one that Duke Sr. gets to create a little bit intentionally, I think, in Exile. We talked a lot about like it wanting to be the opposite, right? Feminine versus masculine, that if this was a female-led society, how would that contrast with the masculine? And we looked at a lot of things, and I think eventually somehow it just occurred to us naturally that it was actually a rejection of that binary that made the most sense for that society to reinvent itself. And so the silhouettes that we'll see on those bodies could be worn by any of them, regardless of the actor's gender or the character's chosen gender or born sex. They are non-binary, gender-neutral silhouette that feels loosened and relaxed and lighter in color and palette, like a little bit of freedom. But there remains a little hierarchy in terms of how we identify leaders as opposed to community.
Yeah, I think the thing that I was thinking about also is that, you know, when people who are disenfranchised, when they get power, how will they lead? How will we lead? Will we lead in the ways that we've been taught to lead? Like, we're going to, like, I can't wait till I get that power and then I'm going to be in, or will we change?
Right.
What, will it just be a rejection of everything and it's this other thing, or will we say, actually, there's space for all of us? And that's something that I'm really interested in exploring, which might be a great way to go into.
I was wondering if I should start with Sarah.
Yes,
Yes.
Great.
So Sarah Clement, who couldn't be with us today, wanted to share some thoughts in response to the set model that's presented, and she also provided some slides that are images of the model. So I will share her words as we get to look at them on the screen. When we first met to talk about As You Like It, one of the earliest things we discussed was the desire for Arden to come directly out of the trappings of court, that we are not suddenly transported to a magic land, but rather that we are surrounded by pieces of the old world that we see in a new way. Our court world is boxed in, beautiful but shadowed and static.
You can go one back, Jeremy.
Yes. During the design process, we talked about how arriving in Arden should feel like a release, an expansion, a sigh of relief. When we leave court, the silks shrouding the space fall away. The center panel that is a towering wall in the court opens up and becomes the maze of our forest. A piece of the grated floor flies out and reveals a sheltering, floating canopy. Our Arden is not escapist or Edenist. It is an exile for Orlando, Rosalind, Celia, and the Duke, their friends. But in Arden, we see the old world broken apart, and it is in this displacement that there is the chance for these people to reimagine their lives. In the show floor, you'll see references to kintsugi, the Japanese art of fixing broken pottery with gold. Kintsugi is a repair that doesn't focus on disguising the break, but instead on how beautifully it has been mended. Its history is not hidden, and its repair and recovery make it unique. The idea of how we move forward, how we recover, That is something I think a lot about these days. Our communities, our nation, our climate, how do we remember our difficult histories, and how do we make a better place without throwing in the towel or throwing out everything? How do we move forward from a place that might seem impossibly broken? Finding the hope and the potential to remake and reimagine what drives our protagonists in As You Like It and their journey feels like a wonderful way to usher in 2019.
Should we go text?
Yes. So 3 years ago, I sat here and talked to you all about madness in Twelfth Night, which you probably don't remember, but I did. This was the last time we did a Shakespeare comedy in the Bomer. And this year, as I've been examining As You Like It, I've been struck by how foolishness has a very similar presence in As You Like It to the presence that madness has in Twelfth Night. There's barely a scene that goes by in As You Like It without someone being called a fool, without someone commenting on their own foolishness, without someone expounding on the nature of foolishness, or someone just making a fool of themselves. Duke Frederick to Celia, thou art a fool, thou art a fool. About Celia and Rosalind, foolish runaways. Touchstone, I, now am I in Arden, the more fool I. And also, the fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. Silvius, if thou rememberest not the slightest folly that ever love made thee run into, thou hast not loved. Rosalind to Silvius, fools such as you. Jaques calls fools into a circle with her Duc Dame song, and then once she meets Touchstone, she can't shut up about fools. And of course, the chorus of one of the most beautiful songs in the play, most loving is mere folly. I would note that the Elizabethan usage of mere did not mean just or only the way we tend to use it. When an Elizabethan said something was mere, he or she meant that it was completely or entirely. So it's not that love is only foolishness, it is entirely foolishness. Yes. Now, there are also references to folly in Twelfth Night, and there are also references to madness in As You Like It, but folly is a particular preoccupation here. And I got to thinking that where madness implies a loss of agency or control, in folly there is always, theoretically at least, the capacity to choose differently. There is the capacity to do something more sensible. For whatever reason, the fool walks through the door that others can't or don't or won't. Touchstone says your if is the only peacemaker, but it's also your great fool maker. The fool lives on the edge of if and says, why not? The fool dares to turn over that stone and see what's underneath. So as with Madness in Twelfth Night, all of that makes for a very serviceable term paper. But what does it have to do with performing the play? I think it has rather a lot to do with it. Because I think the moments of foolishness in this play sometimes require tremendous bravery on the part of the characters. And so we have to bring to those specific moments a tremendous bravery of our own. And sometimes those moments require an exuberant playfulness from the character and from us. And sometimes they have great poignancy that we have to give ourselves to. This is a specific preoccupation of Shakespeare's in this play, and as such, it must be recognized, embraced, and played specifically in order to tell this story truly and completely. Fortunately, we have a team and a cast who are more than up to the task, and I look forward to all the tomfoolery we will enjoy together very much.
Yes. Great, yes. Hi, everyone. I will be speaking on behalf of Team Dramaturgy, and particularly when there's a duo, I always want to share that the technical term for two dramaturgs is a luck. So, a very good place. The first thing that I actually did want to say, though, is last year, Rebecca Clark-Carey and I began a conversation that spoke to the intersectionality of text and dramaturgy and how meaningful it would be for us to really support the mentorship of individuals who are interested in that intersection. So with that, with the support of our colleagues, we were able to create this residency that looks at Shakespeare dramaturgy and text direction holistically, and we'll look at that across the main stage productions. And I'm just so thrilled that our assistant director for Henry V, Wiley Bachelor Gorin, said yes to this and will be with us this season. So I want to acknowledge the inauguration of that and the thrill of that. As Rosa said, so many of the conversations that we began with for this production really looked at gender and the intersection of gender identity, gender expression, gender in performance, and how that eventually led to a gender transposition for the characters in As You Like It. It's a comedy that begins like a history. So in my second season working with Rosa Joshi, I've learned to prepare myself for countless mind-blowing insights that will show up in these conversations and often have notebooks that are piled with them. And I remember when Rosa said this, that I found myself reflecting on it because I truly do feel like it speaks to Rosa's artistic journey personally and her ongoing mission to expand gender inclusivity and representation in Shakespeare productions that she conceives from the page to the stage. Something that Rosa mentioned today in the rehearsal room is this idea of whenever she creates and models a Shakespeare production for performance, she always looks at the people who are not seen or who have not seen the play and wants them to be the primary audience. And I feel like that's really critical also with the representation. We look at those who are often unseen or marginalized from these plays, from these roles, and figure out how they can be truly part of the world that's being created. I first learned about Rosa's passionate dedication to re-examining the politics of patriarchy present in Shakespeare's history plays, or political war plays, as she prefers to call them, through her all-female productions with the Upstart Crow Collective in Seattle. And when I asked Rosa what all-female productions of Shakespeare's plays mean to her, there were two responses that she shared that felt really critical. Wanting to give more juicy roles in Shakespeare's plays to badass women, so that's number one, and really having the opportunity to view political oppression and manipulation, war and conquest through the lens of a female-identified acting company. So what can be revealed through that? With that, when Rosa, Alan Armstrong, and I began this exploration, we looked at all of the elements that open As You Like It that are very much in alignment with how you usually start Shakespeare's history plays. A rigid and controlled court, political and positional upheaval, and a cycle of banishment and exile. But then the play ends with a reunion of couples and families that illuminate the power of love and the triumph of hope. And I agree with Rosa that I feel hope is an incredible thing, a simple and profound thing, and how meaningful that was to look at this world through that way. So then we examined the effects of the patriarchy and toxic masculinity, and particularly how they impact Rosalind. And Rosalind is a character that I just love, who I altogether feel is courageous and witty and imaginative and has such a strong spirit, and who is confined in an oppressed world and really torn between the loyalty to her cousin and the way in which she then seeks her immediate family out in Arden and seeks her love. And I always find it so fascinating that once she is exiled, this strong, powerful woman really looks at the manifestation of gender as performance in the male persona of Ganymede, which I always feel is altogether protection and commentary in the way in which that role manifests. So with that, we came up with these questions of what if the cycle of exile in the court reflected the oppression of women who carry power at their core and the men in power who fear them? What if Duke Frederick banished his sister instead of his brother, and Rosalind's quest to reunite with her mother becomes the driving force of how she finds strength in her true self at the end of the play? And ultimately, what if the assembly of diverse female leadership in Arden is the leadership this world and our current world needs to survive and thrive? So in this production, Duke Senior, Jaques, Corn, Amiens are all played by an incredible ensemble of women as women, who I believe give us an enlightened perspective of leadership in the world of Arden. There's that great scene where Orlando first comes upon this troupe and immediately goes towards kind of the spirit of, aggression and defense. And I remember hearing it today in the reading and just hearing the way in which there was such compassionate leadership and acceptance that really just reminded me of like, oh yeah, that's what the leadership is that we see in Arden. So with that, then, the collective examination further led to how representation of love and relationships could be more inclusive in Arden, a world that we look at where free thought, curiosity, and openness are constantly present. And as Rosa mentioned, it was really incredible working with Will Wilhelm about how to take the character of Audrey and make them Aubrey, who is a non-binary Forest local, courted by Touchstone. And I have to say, I've always loved this character, which I feel is so undervalued in this play and written off, but I truly feel is just unabashedly themselves. And I feel the freedom to proudly just fully be themselves throughout the play is an incredible thing. So with that, we end with an Arden that's worth journeying for, where the discovery and embrace of one's authentic self and the community they choose to be in, as opposed to the community they're confined to, creates harmony, peace, and the resilience to move forward.
For coming and joining us this afternoon, and here's to a great 2019, everybody.